What if the person you thought you knew had a life filled with sacrifices you could never have imagined? This funeral changed everything. At Cypress Grove Cemetery, a solemn crowd stood in silence around a freshly dug grave. The soft murmur of voices carried away by a gentle breeze. Family, friends, and acquaintances had gathered, all paying their final respects to Robert Henley, a man deeply admired for his charitable work and warm presence in the community. The afternoon sun reflected off the polished black headstone, its inscription gleaming, "A life of service and sacrifice." Among the mourners, an elderly black woman stood out, though not by choice. She wore a modest, deep green dress, and her silver hair was neatly tucked beneath a simple hat. Clutching a single red rose, her hands remained steady, yet her eyes revealed a weight of emotion far greater than those around her. While quiet exchanges of pleasantries passed between others, few acknowledged her presence. She stood there, silent, at the very edge of the gathering, both commanding and understated. Only when the pastor finished his final prayer did she step forward, her movements slow and deliberate. The crunch of gravel beneath her heels was the only sound as the mourners instinctively parted, letting her pass. Reaching the grave, she paused, her gaze resting on the polished casket. Then, with great care, she placed the rose on top. Turning to face the crowd, she spoke, her voice steady, clear. "My name is Hatti Delay." A ripple of surprise spread through the group. Faces turned toward one another, brows furrowed, hushed whispers passed between them. Who is she? How could she claim to know Robert better than any of us? Hatti's gaze swept over the sea of faces, her expression calm yet unwavering. "By the time today is over, you'll understand why I'm here," she said, her voice carrying both certainty and a quiet promise. "And you'll come to know the Robert Henley most of you never truly did." A heavy silence settled over the crowd. What she was about to reveal would leave everyone questioning everything they thought they knew about the man they had come to honor. The murmurs faded. Only the rustling of leaves remained as Hatti took a deep breath, her voice carrying an undeniable authority. "I met Robert 50 years ago," she began, her eyes distant, as though watching the memories unfold before her. "Not in this town, but in Montgomery, Alabama. A time and place where people like me weren't welcome in places like this." The crowd leaned in, curiosity flickering in their eyes. Back then, Robert was just a young man, full of fire, full of ambition. He worked as a teacher, but his heart belonged to the civil rights movement. "That's where we met, on the steps of a church, where we were organizing sit-ins." Her voice carried both pride and pain. "He wasn't afraid to stand beside me, even when it cost him everything." Gasps rippled through the mourners. The Robert they had known was kind, generous, but none had ever heard of this part of his life. Hatti let the weight of her words settle before continuing. "We weren't just allies in the fight for justice," she said, her voice softening. "We became family when the world tried to tear us apart." She glanced at the casket, her hand trembling slightly as she adjusted her hat. "He called me his sister in every way that mattered, even when it wasn't safe for him to say it out loud." The crowd shifted, discomfort creeping into their expressions. They were struggling to reconcile this version of Robert with the man they thought they knew, the well-respected philanthropist who had helped many but had never spoken of his own battles. Hatti's voice grew firmer. "What I'm telling you isn't just about the past," she continued. "It's about the man he became because of those struggles." She let the silence stretch, scanning the faces before her. But what she shared next would pull back the curtain on sacrifices none of them could have imagined. Her hands tightened around her purse as she took a steadying breath. Robert didn't just fight for others. He fought a battle no one ever saw. A tension settled over the crowd. Every eye was locked on her as she pressed forward. For years, he carried a secret, a truth none of you would have guessed. She paused, her next words laced with sorrow and defiance. Robert had a son. Gasps rippled through the mourners. A child he couldn't openly claim, because of who the mother was. The crowd buzzed with stunned whispers. Hatti's eyes met their shocked faces, but she didn't waver. His son, Samuel, was born to a woman Robert couldn't marry. The boy was black, like me. And because of the time and place we lived in, Robert had to keep it a secret, for the sake of his career, for his safety. More murmurs filled the air. Disbelief. Shock. Hatti continued, her voice unwavering. But I was there when Samuel was born.
And Robert?
He made sure that child never went without. He paid for his schooling. He wrote letters every week. He visited whenever he could, under the cover of darkness. She blinked away tears, her voice thick with emotion. He loved that boy with all his heart, even if it had to be a quiet love. At that moment, a tall man stepped forward from the back of the crowd. His presence was commanding, his broad shoulders carrying the quiet dignity of a man who had long lived in the shadows. The resemblance was undeniable. The crowd turned, frozen in silence. Samuel walked up to Hatti, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Thank you," he said, voice thick with emotion. "For everything." Hatti smiled through her tears. "It was always my honor." Turning back to the crowd, she spoke one final truth. Robert's greatest love wasn't in the accolades or the respect he earned. It was in the people he fought for. People like me. People like his son. People this world tried to overlook. A long silence followed. Not just from shock, but from reflection. A reckoning. Hatti took one last look at the grave before facing the mourners. "So, I leave you with this question," she said, voice soft yet firm. "How will you be remembered? Not for what you had or the titles you carried, but for the lives you touched and the love you gave." She let the words linger, heavy with meaning. Robert's legacy isn't written on this stone. It's written in the hearts of those he lifted up. The air shifted. The weight of the truth settled into the souls of those gathered. Some wiped away tears. Others nodded quietly. A few simply stood in silent thought. As mourners slowly began to disperse, many approached Hatti and Samuel, offering words of gratitude, promises to honor Robert's legacy. The cemetery, once a place of finality, had become something else. A place of renewed purpose. If this story moved you, let it remind you, kindness and sacrifice often go unseen, but they are never forgotten. Live a life that leaves an impact. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to help us continue sharing stories like this one.